All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for tuning in. It's Thursday night. It's Big Dave's Healthy Happy Hour. We are super excited tonight for a terrific guest. Amy Berger is joining us, and I'll introduce her in a minute. Couple of quick announcements before we start. New website is now up and running, unremarkablebrain.com. Wait, I got a banner about that here somewhere. There it is. Head on over there. It's hosted now. My blog there is hosted by Substack. So if you sign up, you can actually subscribe, and the stuff gets right to your inbox where you can ignore it. And keep posted on everything going on here. All these live events and my blog and hopefully the podcast that's going to come out of this. So do go over, join up, and I'll see you all there. I'm also on Facebook, Twitter, and all the good places. That was my only announcement for tonight. So let's get right into it. Super excited about tonight's guest. I'm just going to read because she's got such a great resume. I'm just going to read this bio for Amy Berger. She's a U.S. Air Force veteran and certified nutrition specialist. She specializes in helping people do keto without the crazy. That is her. That's her trademark phrase. She's got a master's degree in human nutrition. She writes about a wide range of health and nutrition-related topics such as insulin, metabolism, weight loss, diabetes, thyroid function, and more. We're going to ask her about all that stuff. We're also going to ask her about her books. One of them, Alzheimer's Antidote, I've got right here. The other two are on my Kindle, so I can't really show you those. But she's also written The Stall Slayer, and the latest one is End Your Carb Confusion, which she's co-written with Dr. Eric Westman. Before I bring her on, let me just my usual disclaimer. Everything that you hear tonight, none of it is nutrition advice. Amy is not your doctor, so be sure to talk to your doctor, nurse, healthcare professional, guru, shaman, what have you, before you do any of your dietary or lifestyle changes. Okay, that said, let's bring her on. Welcome, Amy.
Hey, how's it going?
Great. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, no problem. And I guess I don't have the ability to leave comments myself, it looks like, unless I'm just not logged in. I think I have a StreamYard account, but anyway.
Oh, okay.
That's okay. It looks like I can see them. I just can't.
Can you see them there, though? Okay, great.
Well, I see one comment. That's okay. That's my friend Wendy. Hi, Wendy. My friend Wendy in Canada is watching.
Hey, Wendy. Nice to meet you. So folks, if you're signed in, please do leave some comments. Say hello. We will have time later on for your questions. So, as you listen, you can type them in there, and we'll be answering any of your questions about low carb, keto, craziness, and all kinds of other fun stuff. So Amy, thanks again for making the time tonight. Why don't we go right back to the beginning? And I always love to get sort of origin stories and see where people are coming from. Give us a little bit of your background. How did you get into all this?
Yeah. In case anyone doesn't know, where should I start? I was not born a low carb, nutritionist. Like I had to learn about this like everyone else did. And I'm a career changer. This is, being a low carb nutritionist and writer is not my first job. I was heavier when I was a kid. My parents owned an ice cream store. I was literally a kid in a candy store, and it showed. And also my favorite activity as a child, and still to this day, is sitting in a comfy chair with a book. So, combine those two things, and you've basically got a recipe for a chubby little child. And the thing is, though, as I got older, I became, more concerned with my appearance. Show me a woman who was born in the, I was born in the late 70s, like show me someone that came of age in that time who didn't become obsessed with that. And so, I started eating better. I started eating what I thought was a healthier, good diet. And I started exercising a lot. Sure. And nothing happened. No matter what I did, no matter how hard I worked. And I spent many, many years beating myself up and feeling like a failure and thinking, what's wrong with me? Well, if 2 hours on the treadmill isn't enough, maybe I need to do 3, madness. And my entry into all of this was actually the Atkins diet. And my mother bought a used copy of Dr. Atkins' New Diet Revolution at a yard sale back. I mean, we're talking many, many years ago, long before the new explosion of keto. This is like late 90s. My mother never read it, but I did. And it made sense. It just made sense to me. And so I did it, and it worked. What a shock. The thing is, though, I was in college at the time, and I wasn't ready to make it my lifestyle. I wasn't ready to do it for the long term. So if there's anyone out there watching who you're trying keto and then you fall off, and you're trying and you fall off, that's okay. It didn't stick with me the first time either. Like it took a while. But long story short, I was so fascinated by this way of eating. I'm doing everything that I'm not supposed to. I'm eating red meat, and I'm eating bacon, and I'm eating cheese, and I'm losing weight. And I'm not obsessed with food all day. I'm not having breakfast thinking about what I'm going to have for lunch. Like, how is this working? What is this craziness? And so after being in and out of a lot of jobs that I did not like and didn't find fulfillment in, I realized, hey, wait, like nutrition is a career. I could do that, and I could help other people learn about this cool low carb diet. So I did. I went back to school, and I got, more formal education in nutrition. And now this is what I do. But I came into it from weight loss. So I was overweight. I do have a family history of type 2 diabetes, obesity, cancer, and stroke. So we have the deck stacked in the family.
Yeah.
But over the years, and I've said this in other places, like my personal entry was from the weight loss point of view, but over all these years, everything that I've learned about the biochemistry of how this works and what it does, it's like weight loss has become almost the least impressive, least important thing that this way of eating. You can literally reverse type 2 diabetes, reverse PCOS, reverse non-alcoholic fatty liver, and you might, by the way, drop a few pounds in the process.
Yeah. Nice side effect, right?
Yeah.
That's great.
And I just want to, like, real quick, I just want to emphasize that I did start with the Atkins diet because for some reason, the modern day, the last few years, Atkins is like a dirty word in the keto world. And I just want everyone to understand that anyone that's having any degree of success with any form of carbohydrate restriction right now, you're basically doing the Atkins diet wrapped up in a shiny new bow. And we all owe him a huge debt of gratitude. Since learning all the stuff that I know now, I've reread the books, and I'm blown away by how far ahead of his time he was. He was writing about things that, like, we're all talking about it now as if it's like we've just discovered all this brand new stuff. Meanwhile, almost 50 years ago, he was on it. Right. So I just got to stand up for Dr. Atkins, that's all.
No, absolutely. And I remember that first wave of Atkins, maybe it was the second wave really in the 90s, because I think he was writing in the 70s, actually. 70s, right? Yeah. So I remember when that came about, and this crazy way of eating, and people are doing this crash diet called Atkins, and then to dovetail on something you said, you talked about all the other benefits other than weight loss. I know you don't have a copy of my book yet. I'll send you one right after this. But my book is about how I discovered the low carb diet in this most recent wave, learning about it and kind of being fascinated by it and just interested in how it works in the science. And by the way, it's also used to treat epilepsy, and which I have. And so, then going down that rabbit hole. So part one of my book is fat on the body, and then the second part is fat on the brain. And so it's just it's fascinating how powerful this is. Not just as a fad. I call it in my book the 100-year-old fad diet. As a matter of fact, it was 100 years ago, I think next month, that the first New York Times article appeared about this idea of managing seizures through diet. And it was a doctor of osteopathy who presented at a conference on this. So that was 1921. And so I could do a little bit of the history of the ketogenic diet, and specifically as relates to epilepsy. But yeah, you're right. Atkins was, and Atkins was a huge forward thinker in that, and realizing that it could help. And he was dealing with cardiology issues. It wasn't a quick fix weight loss thing for him either, right? He's trying to help.
I think it was everything, but it was as controversial as it is now. It was even worse during his time, telling people that no, it's okay to eat butter and it's okay to eat red meat and saturated fat isn't clogging your arteries and all that.
Right. And actually the diet that I'm on now is through the Johns Hopkins Clinic for adult epilepsy is they use the modified Atkins diet. That's what they call it. And so
you work with Eric Kosoff then, huh? Or
yes, his colleague Mackenzie Cervenka. She runs the adult center. He runs the children's center. But yeah, he's great, and I interviewed him for my book as well. And
just a little anecdote here. Two years ago, I think we were at a conference together, and I guess he had a new book out, a relatively new, and so we were both signing books, and they had us at the same table. And I had never met him before, but I've been reading his research for 10 years. I mean, I've read all those papers, and I was like, oh my God, you're Eric Kosoff. Like, it was so.
Like he's a big star, right?
Starstruck at these events, like, oh my God, there's Stephen Finney. Like.
Me too. Well, now you know how I feel right now. See. So, So really interesting stuff. So picking up on that, let's do a little bit of the basics, because some of the folks, I started this series as kind of a thank you to the people who pre-ordered my book, and give them a little bit of bonus content, bring on some of the folks who are real luminaries in the space. And it's grown from that. So we have people who are longtime low carbers here, I'm sure, but we have some people who maybe low carb curious, who who aren't quite sure what it's all about yet. So can you give us a little bit of that? The keto, low carb, whatever we want to call it, the how and the why and the what, if you don't mind.
Yeah, it's actually fun for me to talk about it from this angle, because most of the people who come to me for help with private consultations have already been doing low carb or keto for a while, and they're just not getting the results they want, and we have to troubleshoot. It's pretty rare that I get someone who's brand new, but I love to get someone who's brand new, because like you said, they're low carb curious, they're kind of dipping their toes in the water. And I have a feeling that they're kind of like looking at it from the periphery, because they're so put off by the overwhelming stuff that they see about it. There's 86 million YouTube channels. There's a million different blogs and Reddit forums and all this Instagram accounts. And if you don't know what this is all about and how it works, you might think that you have to spend like $1,000 before you even start the diet. You have to get your ketone meter and this, and buy your MCT oil and the special coffee. Like, no. I've always said I feel fortunate that I started low carb when I did, almost 20 years ago. Facebook did not exist. Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, they didn't even exist when I got started. And so there was a lot less information available, but there was less misinformation and less craziness. There was the food list, and you just follow the list and you're good to go. Right. And so really, if anyone out there is new or just kind of is feeling overwhelmed by all the conflicting recommendations, the single most important thing to do is just cut way, way back on all of the sugar and starch that you eat, all the carbs, even the things that you think of as healthy carbs, like potatoes and beans and sweet potatoes and, rice and all that's whole grain, all that stuff's got to go. And what that does is, instead of your body running primarily on the carbohydrate fuel, when there's like only this much carbohydrate coming in, your body says, oh, there's like no carbs coming in. I better find some other fuel. I'm not just going to die and fall apart. I got to switch my fuel. Right. It switches over to using fat. And the
Right.
ketones are produced as a byproduct of running on the fat. And keto is not automatically a fat loss diet. It's a fat burning diet. When you get rid of the carbs, your body runs on fat. But if you want to lose body fat, you can't overdo the butter and the oil and the cream and the cheese, because then your body doesn't have a need to use its own stored fat for fuel.
Right.
But that's too deep in the weeds. The point is that when your body makes that shift from burning mostly carbs to burning mostly fat, a ton of good things happen all over. There is not one organ or gland or tissue that is not affected beneficially in some way, I think. And this is why people use keto for, epilepsy, migraines, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, fat loss, PCOS, skin tags, and other kinds of skin conditions, fibromyalgia, endometriosis. All of these things get so much better or go away completely. It's, my co-author on the book, End Your Carb Confusion, Eric Westman, says, it's so unbelievable, you won't believe it.
That's right. That's right. That's well put. The quote that I love is Dr. John Rowe, who was a researcher at UCLA and also ketogenic diets and brain health. And he started his talk with people think of the ketogenic diet as a magic bullet. It's not a magic bullet. It's a magic shotgun shell, because it affects so many different pathways in the body, so many different organs in the body. There's inflammation, there's fuel, energy metabolism, all these different things that are involved. And when I interviewed him,
I love Dr. Rowe, by the way. I've cited his work a ton in my talks. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like one of my go-to people for keto for anything neurological.
Yeah, so smart, so just brilliant, and he was really generous to sit down with me for like between running to conferences all over the world. He sat down with me for just a couple of minutes, and it was interesting because he talked about the ketogenic diet. If you take it seriously, makes you rethink. It will make people, drug makers, rethink the way that they think about drugs. Because with drug makers, it's all about find that one druggable target, that one little receptor, that one little thing. And, this defies that, because again, that sort of shotgun approach, it hits so many different things.
Yeah.
And he thinks that might be the future of drug research. And
he has, he has a paper called The Ketogenic Diet in a Pill. Is this possible? And the answer, of course, is no. And I use that in one of my talks. I have a slide that has 16 different mechanisms by which keto might help neurological and neurodegenerative issues. And those are only the ones we know about so far. And so it's like, there is not one single pill or surgery or procedure that can do all of it. You take a pill, maybe it can hit one or two of those targets, 3 at the most. All 16, no, but the diet does. It's really incredible. And I know we sound like snake oil people, like any rare issue someone has. Have you tried keto? Oh, you have Ehlers-Danlos. Have you tried keto? But it's working for people. Yeah.
That's so true. And I always, because I'm on the epilepsy groups online, and I have to hold myself back from being that one trick pony and trying to push it on everybody else. But if somebody asks about it, I'll certainly talk about it.
Right.
But it is funny. The other thing that I like, that I really love that you do, and the video that you posted just today, as a matter of fact, is a great example of that. Is sort of keeping it real and bringing it into the real life side of things. We know that it works for all these different things. We know we have these clinical studies in labs, but we're not in labs, right? We're in real life. What do you think, what do you see in yourself, your clients, people you talk to? Where are the big stumbling blocks, I guess, for people who are trying to get onto and maintain a low carb diet?
For the people who can stick to it, and that the issue of sticking to it is a whole thing in itself, but for the people that can actually adhere to it, the two biggest stumbling blocks we see are too many carbs. So not everybody needs a super strict ketogenic diet. Some people can reap the benefits just kind of cutting back. You know, when I was in the military, I knew guys, now granted, we're talking about like 20-year-old guys, who all they had to do was stop drinking soda and they could lose 15 pounds. Like they didn't need a ketogenic diet. They didn't need all this stuff. They just had to not drink liquid sugar and they could just, fat would melt off them. For some of the rest of us, we have to go a little further. And there are some people who they just have to get the carbs ultra low before they really hit the magic. Some of the really powerful effects won't happen unless you're really triggering that metabolic shift. And then the other big thing we see, particularly when someone's main goal is losing weight, is just too much fat. Like I was saying before, keto, all keto means is that you are being fueled primarily on fat. Now, whether that's your stored body fat or the fat from all your food, that's what determines whether or not you're going to lose body fat. And so one of the big stumbling blocks for people that are having trouble losing weight is they're just overdoing the fat. And you can't blame them, because all they hear online is keto is a high fat diet and you have to eat this certain percentage. And keto, you know, for the people that are new, keto does not work through magical macros or ratios. It works by keeping your carbs really, really low.
Right. I love how you say that in your book. You know, we call it low carb, high fat, LCHF, but really, let's just stick to those first two letters, the low carb. You know, if you're trying to lose weight, that's where the magic is.
No, I will say though, for epilepsy, you might know there are some people who need the 3-to-1 diet or the 4-to-1. I mean, that's pretty austere, but there are some people who need that. So it's like, it always depends on the situation. And it's why it drives me crazy when somebody posts a question online and you've got 800 armchair internet warriors chiming in when you haven't even asked this person any detailed questions about the situation. Like, why isn't keto working? Well, working how? What are you even trying to do? Are you trying to lose weight? Do you have diabetes? Like, I mean, it's nice when people want to jump in and help, but how are you offering information when you have no clue what's actually going on?
Right. Yeah. No, it's true. It's a double-edged sword, I think, because, you know, being as countercultural as it is to cut out carbohydrates. I mean, and I say that meaning, you know, it's impossible. If you're in a city, it's impossible to go to a block without being assaulted by carbs on all sides, right? Pretty much anywhere you look. So to cut them out, you've really got to be, you know, strict. And the support that's given by an online community, whether you're in a Facebook group or whether you're on Twitter and interacting with, you know, folks like yourself or the experts out there or the other, you know, people who are discovering this for themselves and trying it for themselves, you know, and so there's a benefit to that. You know, it's almost like a help group or whatever you want to call it, right? But you're right. There is the flip side of that, which is there's a lot of people out there saying a lot of things, and they may or may not know what they're talking about. Right? What are your tips for the people who are sort of starting out? I mean, your book obviously is what I would recommend, but what are some of the go-to resources? What are some of your favorite things that you see online, whether it be Diet Doctor or any of those sorts of places?
Yeah, let me answer. I want to explain. There's the sun is coming in, so if I look very weird right now, that's
okay. No, you're good.
My line. This is live. This is real life, people. It's just I was like, that looks really weird. But anyway, yeah, I think, I mean, my YouTube channel, I try to keep it simple there, and definitely keto without the crazy. Like if you don't want the overwhelm and the nuttiness, and I think our book, and it's called End Your Carb Confusion, that is kind of, so Eric Westman and I wrote the book that we would want if we were brand new to this. If I didn't know anything about this, how would I want someone to explain it to me?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we did. And other than that, I think Diet Doctor is excellent. And I have like personal friends that work for them, but it can be very overwhelming. The Diet Doctor web, because they have so much content and they've created so much, it's like, so sometimes if I send people links to Diet Doctor, I do link to a specific page, a specific, topic or a specific guide that they have. One thing that I absolutely love that is partly keto, partly not, is Mark's Daily Apple. Mark Sisson?
Yes. Yep.
He is one of my absolute favorites because he's not really dogmatic, and he's kind of like me in that he clearly understands and acknowledges the therapeutic power of a strict ketogenic diet or a strict paleo diet, but there's going to be a little bit of wiggle room for that glass of red wine or that piece of chocolate cake now and then. You don't want to get so austere that you actually forget to just have a nice life and enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
And I really like that about him. And I like that his website and his blog, I don't know how much of it he himself writes anymore these days, but his website in general covers so much of the food, so many good recipes, but he also focuses a lot on the mindset stuff, the lifestyle stuff, and not just exercise, but like self-actualization, fulfillment in your work or I feel like it's a very nice, well-rounded kind of place there.
Yeah.
Other than that, I will say, Rob Wolf too, I would say the same thing about.
Oh, he's great.
I really like Rob Wolf. He's got his own kind of membership group these days, but same thing, very aware of the therapeutic power while also balancing it with just going out and having a good time.
Yeah. No, and that is important. I was talking to somebody the other day about who was interested in this idea of intuitive eating and was telling me about that, and I was like, oh, that's a really interesting idea. And a lot of times I call them diet wars. We've got the vegans versus the carnivores, we've got the keto versus the this versus the that, but I think every one of these different things has something to it, something that we can take away from it, but I guess to frame that in the form of a question, this idea of the psychological, to me, my understanding, I haven't looked into it deeply, but my understanding of the intuitive side is that it is acknowledging that we're real people living in the real world and trying to live a life. And so it's more on the psychology side than on the, let's say, the biology side that most of the keto stuff is. But I like the way that you do incorporate in your books and in your blog, some of the ideas of living life and trying to, trying to stick to a diet in the real world, right? As far as when going back to the struggles that people face, where do, can we talk a little bit about trigger foods and things like that, that you think people get in places where people get into trouble?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's a huge topic. And I think just to talk about intuitive eating, like we could have a 3-hour video about that sometime. That's a huge thing. But just with regard to like people getting started and tripping up, even because I feel like intuitive eating is a backlash and a rebellion against some of what we see in keto, like
right.
You've got experts literally saying supermarket chicken is killing you. Your store-bought ranch dressing is poison. I mean, that's literally like, so the intuitive eating is like, oh my God, like so when you live in that headspace for a couple of years where you have to weigh and measure everything, and you can't go to that restaurant because they might use canola oil, and what if the chicken, and so there's a huge place for giving up and for just, I'm going to eat whatever I want. Like I get it, but that's kind of a separate topic. But I feel like that's a stumbling block for people that are new to this. And it's something we really make a big point of in End Your Carb Confusion. if you have the budget to afford all organic or to shop at your local farm stand, do it. Like, that's great. If you can't, the metabolic effect, that shift that happens that makes all those good health things cascade, come from lower blood sugar and lower insulin and having a fat-based metabolism. It doesn't come because your food is organic or because the beef is grass-fed or because there's no soybean oil. Like, period. Right. The research shows this very clearly, that none of that is really an issue, because none of that has been part of any of the protocols in these trials that have showed how effective this diet is. There was no prohibition on soybean oil or whatever. So, don't let that minutia trip you up. The biggest bang for your buck is going to come from just ditching the carbs. Yeah. So yeah, other than that, the stumbling blocks. That's part of it, though. That's part of it, because when you think that you can't have X, Y, Z, it's a mindset that you get so hung up on the purity and the I think some people, everybody's different. So like there's really no hard and fast rules. It's really about what works for you. Mm-hmm. I tell people, don't trade a sugar addiction for a Splenda addiction. Mm. If you were the type of person that's going to eat the whole tray of cookies, don't eat the whole tray of almond flour cookies. Right. Don't become addicted to keto-fied versions of the things that made you sick and unwell in the first place. Yeah. That's, I think something, and I think it's okay as a transition step. Like if you thinking, I can have a cookie as long as it's coconut flour. If that gets you to move in the right direction, do it. But that might kind of hold you up over the long term. Right. But specific trigger foods, nuts, cheese, just these things that are they're so delicious, and most of us just don't have an off switch. I joke, but it's not really a joke. You get that bag of almonds from Trader Joe's and you're on the couch. We call it hand to mouth syndrome. Yeah. Because before you know it, half the bag is gone and you don't even know what happened to it. Right. Yeah. So there's things like that are technically fine for a low carb diet, but they'll just kind of get in the way of progress if you can't control yourself. Right. No, that's a great point. I've definitely been there. Macadamia nuts, supposedly, low carb, high fat, great. And then all of a sudden, like Costco size bag. I'm like, wait, what happened there? Yeah. Right. Yeah. Not a good thing. Folks, if you're just joining us, by the way, this is Amy Berger. And if you have questions for her, please do ask them in the chat here. We've got it up. We seeing hellos from Wendy Moore, from John Saunders. Hey, John, and please do shoot us some questions. This lots of great stuff to talk about. In the meantime, I'd love to jump back to your first book, The Alzheimer's Antidote. And again, the connection between diet and brain health, so important. Give us so I've even heard recently the idea that Alzheimer's being called type 3 diabetes. I'm sure you're familiar with that term. Can you kind of tell us about the connection between blood sugar and Alzheimer's or dementia? Yeah, so it's basically the whole premise of my book. I mean, why would a low carb oriented nutritionist have anything to say about Alzheimer's disease? It was actually my thesis in graduate school. This book, right? The kernel of that book was my thesis. And when I graduated, I was thinking this is potentially life-saving, life-changing information. I can't keep this to myself. Like, the world needs to know about this. So I have to write a book. And I turned it, I expanded it into a book that I just sold on my website. And I was fortunate enough that a publisher found it and basically offered me a book deal, which never happens. So that's how the book came to be. But yeah, they sometimes refer to Alzheimer's disease as type 3 diabetes. You'll also hear the phrase brain insulin resistance. Mm-hmm. And type 2 diabetes. And even if you don't have diabetes, if your blood sugar is normal, but you have chronically high insulin, which is a huge problem all by itself, both of those are major, major risk factors for Alzheimer's, regardless of your family history, regardless of your genotype. Everybody's obsessed with this ApoE4 gene.
Right.
That's the number one, like the strongest genetic risk factor. But millions upon millions of people who do not carry even one copy of E4, let alone two, they get Alzheimer's disease. So, and millions of people that have that E4 gene don't get Alzheimer's. So that gene doesn't cause Alzheimer's. It does increase your susceptibility, but the chronically high insulin or blood sugar by itself, independent of any of those other issues, massively raises your risk for Alzheimer's. And the reason it's associated with all this glucose and insulin stuff, and the reason they call it the type 3 diabetes, is because, you know, under like quote unquote normal circumstances, glucose is the primary fuel for the brain. But the major problem in the brain of somebody with Alzheimer's is that the brain is not taking up and using glucose properly. I like to think of it as a fuel shortage. It's like an energy crisis in the brain. And so if the brain isn't getting enough fuel, of course you have memory loss. Of course you have confusion and personality changes. Your brain is starving. So that's where the glucose connection comes. And I don't know how far you want me to get with that. I can stop there for now.
Yeah, no, I mean, so the energy metabolism is you know, a huge part of that sounds like, and I guess the chronic nature of it over time, right?
Yeah, it's not something that happens overnight. This is like, so I thank you for saying that, because it's, you know, nobody wakes up with Alzheimer's disease like, oh, I just developed Alzheimer's overnight. They can actually study this, and they see that the decline in the brain's glucose use starts about 20 years, if not more, before you actually get diagnosed. By the time you get, so the glucose decrease is going on and going year after year after year, little declines, until it's finally severe and widespread enough that the brain can no longer compensate for that fuel gap. Now you're starting to show signs and symptoms. But by the time that happens, this disease has been going on for 10 or 20 years. It's just finally gotten bad enough that you're showing the symptoms.
So is there any test that can be done, you know? So I'm approaching 50, and I'm, you know, certainly worried about this. I think we all are. I think it's one poll I saw said it was the scariest disease, you know, to most Americans, right? So, you know, what can we do as now, I guess?
Yeah, it's I have read that it is the most feared disease, even more so than cancer, probably because even though cancer treatment kind of sucks, it does work sometimes. We have millions of cancer survivors. We have people where the chemo and the radiation and everything works.
Right.
We don't have any Alzheimer's survivors. You know what I mean? No one ever survived. So, the tests, it depends on what you mean. There are diagnostic tests, like cognition tests. But in terms of looking for biomarkers or looking at a blood test, yes and no. You know, you can actually get a PET scan. The reason they know that the problem is that the brain is not taking up and metabolizing glucose is because this can be measured by PET scan. So I don't know if you know, or the people watching, with cancer, you know, cancer cells suck up glucose like crazy. So they inject you with this like radioactive glucose to see where the tumors are and where it's most concentrated, where the glucose is being sucked up into the tissue. They can do the same thing in Alzheimer's, except instead of seeing how much, they can see how little is getting into the brain. So it's the same kind of concept, just the opposite. But that's not a standard test to have done. People get that done like when they're in a scientific study or something. I don't know that there's any real like diagnostic test beyond the cognitive tests.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I was just curious because it's something that seems like really sneaks up. A good friend of mine passed away. He got Alzheimer's very early. He was a DC policeman, and by the time he was I think he retired late 50s, and by the time he was 60, I think he passed away at maybe 62, 61, 62. And it was just heartbreaking to watch. I mean, I love the guy. He was a great guy. I rode with him on a rowing, master's rowing club, and it was just in such a short amount of time that he, one year he was having trouble thinking of words. He'd say it's over on top of the and the refrigerator is the word that he's looking for, right?
Yeah.
And then next thing you know, he can't make a sentence, and it's horrifying to watch, and to imagine like being in that situation, how frustrating and how difficult it must be to go through. So.
And I want to point out though, because what you're saying, this is a young guy, like this is what's happening. This used to be an old people disease, right? It used to be, oh, grandpa's getting senile, grandma's losing her mind. You could almost accept it as normal. Like if you're 98 years old, I'd be surprised if you didn't have a little bit of cognitive issues, Right. But I mean, not everyone does. Like some people are 102 and they're sharp as a tack, but you could almost expect a little bit of decline really, really late in life. But we're talking now about people in their 50s and 60s. This is going to bankrupt this country. Yeah. Absolutely. My dad is like 76 now. He's in his 70s. This is going to be a tsunami like we've never seen before of long-term care needs. And but why should this be happening in ever younger people? What else do we see happening younger and younger? Type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance, fatty liver. We have toddlers with little tiny baby fatty livers. That's not from alcohol. Fatty liver used to be an alcohol driven thing. It's not anymore. And type 2 diabetes used to be called adult onset. It's not anymore because little kids get it. So it's totally in parallel and probably for the same reason. So like I don't want to harp too much, but I try to emphasize with people because it's like, oh, they don't think about it this way. When we talk about things like type 2 diabetes or cardiovascular disease or high blood pressure, we know that a lot of these are either directly caused by or made worse by diet and lifestyle. They don't just happen out of nowhere. And yet we dismiss even the possibility that Alzheimer's is every bit a diet and lifestyle disease. We just don't even consider that as a possibility, that like, just like almost every other chronic illness out there that's driven by diet and lifestyle.
Yep. Somehow this just happens to you, right?
Yeah, right. Now, I also want to say though, my book was specifically about this glucose insulin angle. But there are other things that definitely contribute to cognitive problems. To me, Alzheimer's is the metabolic fuel shortage in the brain. Right. You can have a vitamin B12 deficiency totally separate from any glucose insulin. If you have a B12 deficiency, that could cause cognitive impairment. There's long-term untreated hypothyroidism. There are certain metal toxicities, like if you're a welder or a carpenter, you might have had toxic exposure to some things. And then the other one, and I'll just say it real quick, we're not doctors here, statin drugs. That your brain is a very, very, very cholesterol-rich organ. 25% of all the cholesterol in your body is in your brain. So if you are taking a drug that deliberately impairs the synthesis of this crucial substance, you might have some memory problems. And this is in the like main Alzheimer's talk that I've given at conferences and stuff. I have this one slide where I quote directly from the FDA's website. It's not Amy Berger's opinion. It's not a biased, low carb zealot thing. It's from the US FDA saying that it is a well-known side effect of statins that are memory loss, confusion, cognitive issues.
Wow.
So, and how many of our elders and our parents have been on these drugs for 10, 20, 30 years. Maybe not 30,
more and more of us every year.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, do you have time for a couple of questions?
Yeah, sure. I see some in there.
We see a couple in here. I've got one from Leanne Robinson, Maine, my sister, full disclosure. Hey, Leanne, she's asking if the low carb eating can reverse the symptoms of dementia if it's already begun.
I'm going to say yes, only because there are some published studies that show this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it depends, like you say, if it has already begun. So assuming it's in kind of a mild state, yes, there are documented cases where a ketogenic diet does reverse this.
Yeah. My mind goes to Mary Newport, who I'm sure you're familiar with, and got her husband on. She was very, very early adopter of this kind of thing. Pretty much went it alone, but got her husband on MCT oil and coconut oil. And as I recall, he was pretty far gone, but I mean, a good day was he could tie his own shoes. And that was success. And she got a few, an extra year or two with him. But yeah, not miracle cure by any means, I mean.
Yeah, he was pretty far gone, but we've all heard the term metabolic syndrome, right?
Mm-hmm.
That, there's 5 criteria. You don't have to have high blood sugar, like you don't have to have you don't have to have diabetes to have metabolic syndrome, but the connection now between metabolic syndrome, which is basically chronically high insulin, that's what it is, metabolic syndrome and cognitive impairment is so strong that they have coined the term metabolic cognitive syndrome. You can search for that on PubMed. Like maybe not everyone watching knows PubMed, but you probably do.
Sure.
Metabolic cognitive syndrome. So to Leanne's question, there's a researcher in, I forget if it's Wisconsin or Minnesota, somebody who is taking metabolic syndrome patients who also have mild cognitive impairment. And she's putting them on a ketogenic diet. And it's not just keto, though. They're doing like a intermittent fasting and some exercise. Okay. And they're basically completely reversing the impairment. And they're documenting it with those the diagnostic cognitive tests.
Yeah.
They go from mild cognitive impairment to a perfect score.
Wow.
So I say now in talks, you fix it when you fix because keto fixes metabolic syndrome. You fix metabolic syndrome, you fix the metabolic cognitive syndrome.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes
all
sense.
For anyone watching, this is not a miracle cure. If your grandfather's 97 and he's really far gone, this is not a magical cure. But if you've got someone in the early stages.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Thank you for saying that. That's huge. Thank you. Marilyn asks, could you discuss the amount of protein that we need compared to fat?
So this is a great example of one of those questions where I need more context.
Okay.
For who? For what goal? Do we want to lose fat? Are we 100 pounds overweight? Are we underweight? What is the goal?
Okay.
One thing as a general piece of advice that I can give, I mean, Marilyn, if you want to expand in the comments, you can give us more information, but as a general rule, the amount of protein compared to fat, this way of eating, again, it doesn't work through magical percentages or ratios. It works by keeping the carbs low.
Right.
If your carbs are already really low and you're having trouble losing body fat, then you do need to eat less fat. And I would increase the protein. This fear mongering about protein is so weird. It's so weird. It's new. It didn't exist when I was new to the Atkins diet.
Right.
So I wouldn't worry about if anything, most women would benefit from more protein.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, no, that's good to know. That's good to know. And yeah, it comes around every once in a while. And I think right now diet doctors doing a thing where they're talking about protein more and increasing their recommendations. And, but it seems like too much protein is probably not your problem. If you have
honestly, in 8 years as a nutritionist, not once has that been somebody's issue. I've never said to someone, you're eating too much protein, never. But Marilyn, I will say it depends on what is your goal, what are you trying to accomplish, and where are you starting from?
Sure.
Yeah.
Great point. Okay, Powie asks, what is the best way to monitor insulin resistance? Do you like A1C, glucose test, glucose tolerance? I think, I'll throw in just quickly, for fun, because I have no life, decided this month to try a CGM. So I'm going to be writing about that on my blog and see what came out of it. And just some interesting things, that my glucose is highest in the morning, and then it tapers off throughout the morning, and then stays low throughout the day, unless I eat something, Chinese food, and it goes berserk or something. But let me start with the CGM. Am I just throwing my money away? Does that give us any indication of whether I have insulin resistance, do you think?
Yes and no, because like glucose and insulin are not the same thing.
Right.
And people really have to appreciate that you could have a low normal glucose level and a low normal insulin level, and you're healthy and you're metabolically flexible and it's all good. Or you could have a low normal glucose level because you have a really, really high insulin level, and that high insulin is keeping the glucose in check.
Right.
So this is all the people that have metabolic syndrome or PCOS or all this other stuff, hypertension, but their blood sugar is totally normal. Their A1C might be totally normal. So Paulie is asking about A1C or glucose. I don't think A1C is the best way to measure insulin sensitivity, because you could have a 5.1 A1C, and if there's anyone watching, no, actually they're the same units overseas, right? Because I would like the millimolar. I'm like, I don't want to.
Yeah, I know it's
percentage. Anyway, I don't know the conversions in my head, but so you could have a perfectly normal A1C and have wickedly high insulin. So A1C is still worth doing for sure, but the best way to monitor insulin resistance is looking at your blood work as a whole, probably your triglycerides, maybe the HDL, your waist circumference. If you ask Dr. Ted Naiman, for those of you who know, he'll say the best way to measure insulin resistance is with a tape measure around your waist, right? I don't know if I agree with that, but
it's probably the cheapest way.
Yeah, the least invasive. I mean, just realize that if you have normal blood sugar, it doesn't mean your insulin is normal. But for most people on a low carb or ketogenic diet, you don't really need to measure the insulin. You don't need to measure all this stuff, because it's probably fine. If the times that I recommend some of this more advanced testing and digging a little deeper is for someone that seems to be doing everything right, and something is still not getting to where we want it. Like, it's like, what's going on? What's wrong? Maybe there is some weird unknown thing. Let's look. But for the most part, I don't, it's not usually necessary to do a lot of those advanced testing. But if your A1C is normal, that doesn't guarantee you have good insulin sensitivity. But if you're happy with your health and your weight, you probably do.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Powie also asks, do I have to do keto to do low carb, or can low carb be South Beach or Weight Watchers type diets? So that's an interesting one, because I think of it as a spectrum almost, but love your take on that one. Yeah.
I feel the same way. So low carb is not really defined. If you're eating less carbohydrate than you are, you're on a lower carb diet. So some people need to be super strict keto to get the greatest benefit. Some people don't. So really the only way to answer that is to know your own situation. What I tend to recommend, and what we actually recommend in End Your Carb Confusion, is start with the strictest. Do the strictest, because you might find little nagging things clearing up that you didn't even know you had until they went away. Like, oh, my knee doesn't hurt anymore. Oh, I don't break out every month anymore, and you get really, really great results with that. And then you gradually increase your carbs and see how it goes. Then you'll be able to identify your own sweet spot as to how much can I have and still feel great and still, maintain whatever weight I wanted to keep off. But no, definitely. when I was talking about Mark Sisson and Rob Wolf earlier, they both are very into keto now, but they weren't always. They're much more well known for paleo and sort of ancestral diets.
Yeah.
And how many thousands of people did that? And that's all they needed. They didn't need keto. They just had to stop eating so much bread and sugar.
Yeah.
But they could still eat fruit. They could still eat an occasional, sweet potato, carrots, things like that. So that's the really long answer to, some people can do a low carb version of South Beach or Weight Watchers. Some people need keto.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the other thing that the people that you've mentioned, the Rob Wolf, the Mark Sisson, and yourself, the common theme of real food. And one thing we haven't touched on that I'd just like to get your take on is with the popularity of keto, we see the keto products, we see the shakes and the cookies and the this and the that. Is there a place for those, or are they sort of a no-no, kind of stay away from all those sorts of things?
It really depends. It's an individual call. It depends on how somebody's wired. Yeah. Because like I was saying before, don't trade your sugar addiction for an erythritol addiction.
Right.
If you would normally eat the whole sleeve of Oreos, don't eat the whole sleeve of coconut flour cookies. Right. So there are people who can have one piece or one thing of whatever, one sugar-free chocolate. There's that like Lily's chocolate. Mm-hmm. I can't have one square. I want the whole bar.
Yeah.
And guess what? It's low carb. It still has calories. It might be low carb, but there are those fillers in it that might affect people differently. So those products, I think, are great for the people that can just eat them in a normal quantity. They're also great, like I was saying, as a transition step. I personally think it's best, rip that Band-Aid off, don't use those products, just cut the carbs, just stick to the very strict food list, don't mess around with this stuff. But if somebody's not ready to do that, these things can be like a little bridge, or I think that's Dr. Sivas's term, right? The bridges and like, so his coffee, whatever. You have to do this in whatever way is going to work. Mm-hmm. And if you are someone that does have diabetes or some other, severe kind of health condition, and you absolutely positively have to have a cookie, have the keto cookie. You're better off having the keto cookie or the keto ice cream than the real thing. Yeah. So, but we have to know our limits, I guess I would say.
Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense. And as always,
what we don't want, probably you and I are on the same page, we don't want people building their diet out of that stuff and then saying, oh, I tried keto, it didn't work.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. No, that's it. And that's the short-term thinking, I think. I'm going to replace my lunch with a keto shake, and I'm going to, it's you kind of have to be in it for the long haul when you're talking about your health. That's kind of my message, and that's what I always go back to.
Yeah, I have a question for you though, if you don't mind, if you have a second.
Yeah.
Just because I have not read your book yet. My apologies. How when I met Dr. Kosoff, I asked him, and I was unpleasantly surprised at his answer. I said, how many people with epilepsy respond to keto? And he said 50%. And I thought it would be much, much higher. I was surprised to know that 50% of people don't have good results. Now, whatever they're trying to do, you would assume, being at the Johns Hopkins program, they have coaches, they have people helping them. But has it really made a huge difference for you, or what's your situation?
It's helped. And thank you for asking. Yeah, the numbers, depending on which study you look at, they will say that 30% of people see seizure elimination, 30% of people see seizure reduction, and 30% of people are seizure free. I am still on medication. So I'm using it as an adjunct therapy, right? And I am finding that it helps with my cognition, and it helps with my energy, and it helps with all the things that we talked about. And knock wood, staying seizure free, but it's not exclusively. Some of the folks that I interview for my book are real night and day success stories. People like Jillian Zolos, if you know her, Jennifer Seizure Salad on
Oh yeah.
Twitter, so I interviewed some of them and people for whom medication just did not work, years and years of trying different medications, and then this was transformative for them. For me, it's a little bit more holistic. I don't distrust to conventional medicine, and I'm thankful for the medications. In fact, I'm weaning onto a newer medication right now. But if you look at the numbers, and my doctor, Dr. Savenko, said this, we've got every year there's a few new medications. Every couple of years, a new medication hits the market. None of them has been shown to be any more effective than any other for epilepsy. The side effects just get better and better, which is good. And none of them has been shown to be more effective than the diet.
Wow.
So, why not? Why not throw everything I can at this?
Yeah.
It's kind of my mindset on it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I support whatever works. There's there's a lot of keto is very good for mental health. Some people have had total remissions of bipolar, anxiety, depression. Some people don't. Some people still need keto helps, but it doesn't go all the way. And there's a seizure medication. I think they also use it for migraines, the topiramate. They use that for binge eating.
Is that right?
Really fascinating to me, and I don't really. I have to research the mechanism, but I'm sure you've heard of topiramate, right?
I have. Yeah.
It's being used for binge eating.
Wow, I hadn't heard that. That's pretty wild.
Yeah, in combination with something else, I don't remember what, some other drug that the two seem to do something to that urge. Very fascinating.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and some of the seizure drugs out there started out as mood, bipolar drugs, and oh, by the way, it also helps seizures. Great. So all these little interconnected.
Well, isn't that's how they discovered Viagra?
Is that right? Oh, I didn't hear
Viagra was meant, I don't remember if it was a blood pressure drug or it was meant for something else. And after it was on the market, men were reporting to their doctor, Doc, I've got this erection for 3 hours. And so then, of course, the company was like, oh, how interesting. What can we parlay this into?
Wait a minute. Yeah.
That was a surprise for them.
That's wild. That is terrific. Well, thank you so much. We're way over time. Thank you so much for giving your time. I really appreciate it. It's been wonderful talking to you.
Yeah.
And folks, let me get your website back up here. Folks, if you want to find Amy, she is at toitnutrition.com. You can find information about her books, coaching, all kinds of great stuff. You're also To It Nutrition on Twitter, Instagram.
Twitter is my main home, and then my YouTube channel, the name is To It Nutrition.
Yes, lots of great information on the YouTube channel too. So folks, go check out Amy Berger, everything she's got going on there. And thank you so much for joining us. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks so much. Good to talk to you.